Hello, hello, and welcome to Imposter Syndrome.
Welcome. Doors open.
Just
Pull up a
kidding.
chair.
Welcome to Call Your Coven, practical advice for truly nonsensical times. I am Bee. I am your resident numerologist, and my pronouns are she, her.
I'm Jeanna. I'm your resident astrologer, and my pronouns are also she, her.
And I'm Meg. I'm the resident tarot reader, and my pronouns are she, they.
And we already gave it away,
Right.
but we are here to talk about imposter syndrome, a very light subject that isn't triggering for anyone.
Very,
Super cool.
very chill. We're just going to have a very chill afternoon talking to each other about our deepest insecurities and fears. It's totally fine, guys. Totally fine.
So nice. So good for all of us. I do actually think it will be good for all of us, but everyone I told, I was like, we're going to record an episode on imposter syndrome. And they were all like, okay, I'll light a candle for you. Like,
100%.
Checks out.
Yeah, this is like the medicine where you're like, ooh, I'm going to feel really terrible and hate every second of this, but we'll probably walk away feeling relief, question mark?
Question mark. Yeah.
Yeah, but this one's exciting because this is our third conversation episode, which everyone has been really responsive about and seems to be loving. And we're loving doing these and in this format. But this is also the first one that was listener requested. So thank you so much to the lovely listener and client of mine. He's amazing. Who asked us to talk about imposter syndrome.
We're taking requests.
Indeed. Yeah.
We are.
Get in the comments.
Yeah, this is Call Your Coven TRL, and tell us what you want us to talk about.
Imagine trying to explain to people now what TRL was, though. Like, it was such a moment. It was so specific. That's a digression.
Okay, all right. We will get back on track. Okay. I looked up some definitions of imposter syndrome because I felt like that was a good place to just start. And I know Meg has one too. This one comes from a study done by the National Institute of Health. And it says imposter syndrome is a commonly reported and experienced phenomenon that affects high functioning, high achieving individuals. This study is particularly about those in medicine or healthcare, but the definition still stands like across the board. And it says it's described as self-doubt of intellect, skills, or accomplishments. And these individuals who experience imposter syndrome, aka us and probably you, cannot internalize their success. And so they subsequently experience pervasive feelings of self-doubt, anxiety, depression, and or apprehension of being exposed as a fraud in their work, despite verifiable and objective evidence of their successfulness. So right off the bat, the two things that stuck out to me were A, people who feel and experience imposter syndrome are typically high achieving, high success individuals already. So what a mindfuck. And then B, the definition that was kind of across the board that was interesting to me was a feeling of being found out. Some kind of paranoia that someone will call you out on being a fraud. And so I want to hear all the takes, but especially in a spiritual, like a conversation about spiritual imposter syndrome or what that looks like. I just felt like the idea of being called out or found out as a fraud was really interesting because there is an element of intuition. Yeah, it's sneaky in this chapter. You go.
I mean, I love that definition, especially as a place to jump off from, because the other word that my attention really snagged on was verifiable. And within spiritual and occult practices, even like for folks who are members of organized religion, verifiable personal gnosis, verifiable shared gnosis, like that is, like you're saying, B, it's a highly individual, very specific to you, based on your intuition, what even is intuition kind of experience. And so I think that, whereas imposter syndrome I've experienced in other professions, was more readily even identified as imposter syndrome. Like I knew that's what it was because I'm like, I feel this in my graduate program, but I got into a PhD program. Like, it's like everyone is smart here. There, you're still confronted with how easily you poke a hole in that question. But within spiritual practices, having a spiritually based business, if you're operating outside institutions of, accepted knowledge under white supremacy, like what even is verifiable? What is, yeah.
No, I mean, I think that's an important aspect of this because the verification aspect is hard. I want to read a little bit of one of the definitions that I found, which this is actually from a dear friend and really brilliant astrologer named Meg Keane. We'll put a link to this essay in the show notes. But Meg writes, imposter syndrome is a fear fantasy. It is a drama going on in the imposter's head, and the plot has very high stakes. Here's how the drama goes. You have unintentionally presented yourself as something that you are not, either by your own actions or by accepting an opportunity you didn't really deserve. You have overreached or been overestimated by someone else. You may be fooling everyone now, but at any moment you could be found out. You're one slip up away. People will wonder what gave you the nerve to pretend to be so much better than you are. They will cast you out. You will lose face and connection unless you keep up the ruse. I just felt relevant for what you both were sharing. Cause yeah, I think that notion that like we've somehow tricked everyone around us and ourselves. And like, it's like this like endless gaslighting loop of, I don't deserve this. I've tricked everyone to think I deserve this. And now I have to keep up the illusion that we're all maintaining and we all believe, but one little slip and everything's going to fall apart. And then we're somehow liable for that.
In some ways, thinking about imposter syndrome reminds me of the literary device of using an unreliable narrator in fiction, in the sense that I think it can be easy, and I'm really just basing this on my own experience, so take it with a grain of salt, but I grew up not thinking that I was a reliable narrator of my own life. I didn't have that language when I was 5, 6, 7 years old, but the idea that my gut instinct and my intuition was not to be trusted was really instilled in me by the church, and mainly my mother teaching the teachings of the church. Like the idea that I was a little depraved sinner who couldn't, everything comes back to religion with me. Okay. Like that's the root of everything. But I remember this was a primary thing that I was working through in my 20s, like that indirectly related to imposter syndrome, because the idea that I could trust myself, that I could trust my experiences, trust what I knew, trust my body and my intuition to be pretty on point, like that was a process. And so I so hear what I liked what Bee's earlier definition, I mean, for obvious reasons, but like that it's often smart and high. It's like smart and high functioning people who often experience this. But I also do think that when you have been raised within a culture, a family where you were like what you said wasn't believed, what you said was readily dismissed, there's not as sure of a sense of self or a sense of self-trust. And that is something that's really underneath this.
It's funny that you said that you liked that part of Bee's definition because of the high achieving and high functioning part, because my immediate reaction was, well, I don't like that definition because I don't think that I'm high achieving. So I need a different set of language around this. That doesn't apply to me, which is just to say, boy, it sure just keeps showing up, doesn't it?
No, I'm actually really glad that we're having this conversation because Meg, the idea that you are not high functioning or high achieving is like actually
definitely high functioning.
Okay.
I suspect that I know what the root of that is, but I'm curious if Meg is gonna.
I mean, I'd love to hear what you think, but I mean, I think generally I don't think of myself when I'm like thinking about characteristics or like ways that I describe myself, not just as a spiritual practitioner, but just generally. Ambitious is not usually a word that I use to describe myself. And so I think I tend to like equate these ideas of like high achieving, high success with ambition. And I like to do a lot of things, and there's a lot of things I want to make. But when I think about ambitious people, I usually think about a particular type of person or level of success or recognition or type A personality or, you know, whatever that I don't identify with at all. So it's also just my own, my own like kind of narrow understanding of that language, I think.
Well, I mean, something is only narrow in as much as like it's what our life is. It's what our learned experience of that is. I was going to say, I think that it's interesting too, even having those words, because those are words that got tacked onto me as a child and consequently that I feel really comfortable with. Like, oh, I was told by the system of public education, you are smart. We're going to put you in this really problematic, talented, and gifted program. Like, we're going to fast track you through certain kinds of classes. And I think and so that even is its own kind of imposter syndrome, though, right? Is like, if you learn in a way that is not supported by whatever the normalized system of education is where you grew up in the world, like if the way you learn does not necessarily do well in a really highly structured school, or, you know, you are a really smart person, but we're not categorized as a good, quote unquote, good student because of book learning just not being your primary way of doing things, like, then yeah, it makes a lot of sense too that there would be imposter syndrome around like, do I even get to call myself, like Meg is the most prolific person I know, like straight up.
But I was told I wasn't smart in school. And I was like a BC student. I didn't do well in school. I didn't particularly like school. And I was told by adults throughout my life that I wasn't very smart. So yeah,
and
that's true.
That sure will do a number on you. Like, sorry, not to be like, and this is the part where I psychoanalyze my wife. Like, armchair psychology.
No, it's all good, but I think that's an important piece of it. Is like, and not to be like, imposter syndrome always comes from childhood trauma or like shitty things that have happened to you, but
that's where we learn
for some of the stuff. Yeah,
but those are the foundational stories on which everything else gets built. And I'm always like watching some of my best friend in particular, watching her parent her children has been so wildly healing, because I also grew up with my parents being like, you'll be a parent someday, you'll know how hard it is, you'll do the same things we do, da 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 da. And I'm watching my friend make such radically different choices than her parents did, than mine did, like, and her children like actively believe that they are good and worthy and have never been told to shut up and go in a corner in their lives. And it's absolutely wonderful to see what the impact of that kind of holistic support of the natural way that their child likes to learn and explore, like how much that encourages a child to blossom and not to feel the restrictions. Sorry, I'm going off on tangents now.
I don't think it's a tangent at all, because I think what we're saying is that not everybody has experiences of imposter syndrome. But if you've had certain childhood experiences where you were not encouraged or to flourish or to trust yourself and all of those things, then you might have more experiences of imposter syndrome. But I think if the next generation is going to make progress, then in a lot of ways that does start with how we as adults then treat children and agree. I just have to say, I'm so glad that all of this has been talked about at the top, because it really validates a kind of weird, cool little thing that popped in this morning. Because I was thinking about what numbers I typically associate with the experience of imposter syndrome. And it is always 8. It's always been 8. Because 8 is like a really powerful number, and it does symbolize somebody being embodied, being in their own power, going after what they want. And so then we look at the other side of the coin, which is, I'm not the right person for this. I don't deserve this, self-doubt versus confidence, all that jazz. But what popped in earlier was that 5 is actually kind of where the journey starts. And I was thinking about our conversation and the April forecast about the Hierophant. And you both have already said 5 words in like 5 energy words in what you've been sharing. But I think in 5 energy, it's where you break free from the childhood experiences or like whatever experiences you were in before, whether that was because you were trapped there due to age or circumstance, or that you are in a prison of your own making. You know, that's definitely a version of this. But 5 is where you experience freedom and liberation from something and make a change or make a different choice. And so much of that is rooted in self-knowledge, self-trust, and personal gnosis or personal experience. And I think to even get to 8, where now you are maybe questioning what it is that you've built with your own experiences and your own sense of self, you have to go through that journey that is really tricky and painful of coming to trust yourself and see yourself as an authority, because that's the only way that you're then going to build something that's actually worthy of looking at it and being like, am I afraid of this in some way? That fantasy, you know, that fear fantasy. I love that. Yeah, fear fantasy is good.
What you're saying, Bee, reminds me, so many of my examples are going to be steeped in the writing and lit world because that's what I know. But what you were saying about your own authority. And again, I just come back to in, the context in which we live, US, dropping once again into really severe forms of fascism, the repression of varying kinds of people, what they can say, what they can't say, literally kidnapping and then trafficking people for speaking on behalf of Palestinians. Like it just really reminds me too that, I mean, and listen, what do I know? I'm not a psychologist, but like, is this het white man who's ever felt this? Like, because the majority of people I know who have felt some version of this are people who dominant societal narratives tell them, whether because of their ethnicity, religion, race, sexuality, gender, like level of disability, they are dismissed as an authority over their own body. They are dismissed as an authority over their own person and their own experience. Like I see that, like we see it when women and like queer folks are disbelieved in sexual assault trials. We see it when anyone who does not quote unquote look like a healthy person, which is to say thin, like goes to a doctor and is told, well, you just need to lose weight. Like your symptoms are clearly just the result of X, Y, and Z. Like the amount of energy it takes for those folks who have those experiences, those of us who have those experiences, to assert our own authority. Sorry, I'm like literally slamming my fist into my other hand over here. Like it takes so much more energy. It takes so much more, it just demands more. The cost to assert your authority, especially in that 5 space, B, that you were talking about, like when you're breaking through, like it's just a much higher cost. Yeah. Oh, and the reason that this reminded me of it was because my friend Arabelle Sicardi, brilliant writer, has a wonderful Substack. We'll link it in the show notes. She wrote a recent conference that's very big for writers and academics in the US. It's called AWP. It was in LA recently, and she went to this conference and then proceeded to write a beautiful essay begging women and queers specifically to stop saying, I wrote a thing. And it's funny, but it's also like, it's that internet speak of, I wrote a thing. It's a book that required years and reporting and research, but like, oh, it's just my little thing I did. Like, as opposed to just claiming, hey, I wrote a book. Hey, I've been researching that. And just the whole essay is this exhortation to what you're talking about of like asserting authority.
It's like when people in that same vein of like, I did a thing. It's like when people are like, some personal news. And I'm like, you're the CEO now or something. You know, it's like some like massive professional accomplishment. And they're like,
I am so guilty
like,
of some personal news.
Like, stop. I don't think I've ever said that in my entire life. Like some personal news. Like, no, you're fucking doing a huge ass professional, amazing thing. It's not, I don't know. And I'm sure
enough for both of us, babe. Don't worry.
I mean, I flip on the other side, which is I just will never announce anything, like, or I'll say it one time and then let it, which is not better, to be clear. But yeah, it's just the immediate, like, I can't even talk about this without minimizing it and making it small and making it like downplaying the accomplishment and the effort and the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into this thing now being able to exist. It's like, I can't even brag about it without making it small first, which is just...
It's like, maybe if I only take up a small amount of shelf space, you'll let me stay here. And you'll let my
maybe that's
thing
the
get
right amount of pride to be okay. Like,
jumping off of what B said with like, these are numbers that you think about when it comes to planets that I relate with imposter syndrome. It's the sun. It's the sun. It's that sense of self, that sense of vitality, that sense of ability to assert oneself upon the world. Like it's the sun. And there are definitely certain placements that may make people more or less likely, more or less prone to this kind of behavior. But like, there are so many ways it can show up, you know, like I have a 12th house sun, so that's pretty obvious. But like, someone could have a very prominent, I'm seen regardless of whether I want to be, first house or 10th house sun placement, and maybe they've got Saturn like right there. You know, there are so many ways that it can show up astrologically, but it is that really central solar question of, oh my God, I can't believe this is what's coming to mind. The religious trauma is with you always. But it's like that little children's song, you know, like hide it under a bushel. No, I'm gonna let it shine. If you know the song, you know that it's about faith. It's about belief in Jesus and like being the respective flame. But I think about it as like just that flame that is your own personal hearth fire. Are you gonna like, do you let it shine? I can't believe that's the example that I came up with. Man, Martin Luther and like children's hymns. I'm really
no, it's I'm actually remember. I have to see if I can find it, but I it would be hilarious if it was for the sun card, although I don't know that it is. But I wrote about that song. I like researched that song and like talked about it in a tarot essay a year or two ago. If I can find it, I'll throw it into the show notes. I just can't remember which card it was for. But it wasn't just a hymn. Like it has roots in like rebellion and I don't know. It's very cool. It's got a cool story. I'll if I can find this essay that I wrote, I'll put it in the show notes. Like I really am the person that like makes a thing and then forgets what it is. Like once it's out in the world, it's out of my body. I'm like, I don't know what's happening.
Well, that's interesting. I do want to put a pin in that because I think the idea of writing something and then reading back, and who hasn't had the experience of like, oh, did I write that? Or like, did I do that? And I feel like that's, very intrinsic. But without all of the religion, I just think that's like about your divine spark. And this might be my 8th house sun in Cancer. Coming through, but like I really do feel like it is a vulnerable act of saying, and this goes back to I made the thing or I did this thing, like it's a vulnerable act to make it, and then it's also an incredibly vulnerable act to share it and to allow people to see it and receive it, and then also open yourself up to feedback or criticism or applause, and validation. But I think in terms of imposter syndrome, it's all about vulnerability. And so of course there would be a fear response. Of course there would be a feeling of like, hey, I'm really sticking my neck out here. And especially in the spiritual space, and I can share some of my own experiences later, but like what you were saying about, being your own authority, saying this is who I am, what I believe, these are the practices that I do or use that work for me. And also this idea of verifiable. This is a question for both of you too, is like, we all are stepping forward as some sort of experienced, I'm not going to go expert, because I think that's where imposter syndrome really thrives, is like in those words that feel absolute. And we're like, no, I can't say that. But we all have our experiences, we all are experienced, and we're talking about things that like tarot, numerology, astrology, that we are so not the soloist. You know what I mean? Like we are in a choir of like incredible people also talking about the things we're talking about and doing the things we're doing. So I am curious for both of you, like what has shown up for you in terms of putting your work out there and either comparison culture or even just, yeah, what gives you like the audacity to speak on something that so many people around you are speaking on?
I appreciate that you're asking that, Bee, because I was going to ask us to share personal examples. And I love the framing of it as a choir. Like, that's just singing in my brain right now. I just really love that.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, because we're all like integral voices. And I think, you know, there really are very few new things under the sun.
Word.
And so this imposter syndrome is really straddling that individual collective line of saying, what is mine and what might just be really understandable ego stuff that I have to work through. I think we're all adding to a chorus.
All right. I want us to get into the examples, but what you're saying is just like making me think of even that, like between straddling the individual and collective, how much of the genius in the tower individualist mentality about like successful, like prominent artists, prominent business people, what have you, has done so much damage. I see it in my client chair almost every day. The disregard for how important things like simultaneous discovery are, like that happens in science, it happens creatively too. And just the extent to which certain words within English, at least, it's like we call people geniuses rather than the origin of that in the Greek, which was having a genius, having a daemon, like that was a spirit that you collaborated with, like, and just that transition from I have a genius to I am a genius. Like, just again, language so constructs our reality and the way that we understand the world. Yeah.
Okay, yo, that's juicy. I just have to say that's really juicy because that's what we were just talking about with the like you read something and you're like, oh, did I write that? And what I think I was trying to get to with like ego is that it's like we are just the channels for things. And like, yes, we have creative drives and we have creative, we are the ones who take action. But so often I'm like, well, that wasn't me. I just put fingers to a keyboard and like whatever wanted to come through came through. So that's very much in the sense of like having or being in relationship with, as opposed to like I am. And maybe that shift we just solved imposter syndrome.
There were
We did it.
years.
It only took like 20 minutes, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh. That wasn't hard.
You are welcome. But I think that at least for my own imposter syndrome / my own like relationship with creativity and spirituality and ego and all of these things, the notion that something is handing me a thing to make and it's just my job to make it, like that I'm just the vessel, that I'm just the delivery system, that special delivery from XYZ, it's just my job to package it up nicely and distribute it. I often find very freeing and very empowering. It's much easier for me, it's much easier for me to be proud of and advertise or even brag about something that I've made if I don't think that I actually made it, or if I think that if there's some part of my brain that's like, this came from something else and I'm just the lucky messenger, you know, it's like it immediately flips a switch. And I think that there is a way that that's really fun and juicy and lovely and like feels like this is my spiritual job, this is my purpose, this is a lovely thing. But it's also kind of a way of bypassing my own pride in a thing that I did have a hand in creating, you know? So it's a very double-edged sword. And I think about this particular idea a lot because I think the more you kind of lean into that idea and learn how to listen for the ideas that want to be made or be born, the easier it gets to hear them and make them. But then you have to keep thinking about that. And that's in a lot of ways where I kind of find myself sometimes. So yeah, without getting
This
too
all
woo.
feels very Mercury ruled to me.
I was gonna say, like, I'm just Mercury's child over here babbling. So like this is like half my life is, oh, that sounds fun. It's right here in my hands right now. I have to make this as quickly as possible and get it out into the world because that's my job now.
You also have the skills, you have the discipline. There's a reason that's
all in there too. But I'm just saying that dichotomy, that back and forth, those things existing simultaneously is like delicious and also deeply uncomfortable, like all at the same time.
So with numerology specifically, I do think this is interesting because numerology was one of the first things that the first spiritual tools that I ever got really cool and excited over. But I suck at math. So I was like, I'm never going to teach anyone how to do any of this. And so I do regularly say, like in workshops and stuff, this is a huge cosmic joke that I'm here sharing this information with you because I don't understand it myself in any kind of mathematical or like standardized testing way. But I do think that when I started talking openly about numerology and I made my first zine and was sharing the information, I do think it was in response to how many tarot readers were making use of the space and seeing numerology as something that was intrinsic to all these other tools, but that nobody young, kind of, honestly, was really talking about. So while I definitely absolutely still battle feelings of like, I should not be the one to be sharing this with you, I do think I leaned into a niche so that I could stand out a little bit more in the chorus, and therefore talk about things like tarot and astrology like through a different lens so that it felt like new or different information. So I don't know if that's like necessarily when I felt imposter syndrome, but I could see myself taking steps, especially in hindsight, to engage with the experience of imposter syndrome totally in a way with my work, but also to like mitigate it.
I have a very similar, in hindsight, it is very clear that the astrology for writers came because, on the one hand, that was what I was doing when I started the newsletter in 2019. Good Christ. I was still freelance pitching. I had just got an agent. I was working on a so long ago draft of Heretic. I can't even remember. I was writing actively for a lot of now shuttered outlets on the internet. And I was tweeting about astrology. It was a personal like research hobby. And then I would tweet about it in relationship to writing or famous writers. And I just had friends get very loud about being like, hey, do you do that? Like, will you give me a reading? Will you do this? And I agree, B. I think in hindsight, my own niching down into like talking about astrologies, but typically for like artists, writers, creatives, was absolutely both because my marketing brain was like, this field is saturated. Like 6 years ago, it was oversaturated. And why should anyone listen to me? But also, this is an area where I have verifiable gnosis on like with the writing. Like I have an agent, I have a lot of bylines. Like there is a reason that that I should be listened to in terms of like writing advice given through astrology. These days, and actually really since the start of my career in the field, for me, imposter syndrome shows up the most prominently with live client readings. For a long time, I did not do live client readings because I was so nervous to be on, like, just to be with someone else in that space. And it was very much a doubting my own authority, especially when I am younger. At this point, I'm around the same age as a lot of my clients, and I certainly have a bench of them who are, 10, 20, 30, 40, even years older than I am. But 6 years ago, I was like 31 and had just gotten through my Saturn return and just had a lot of anxiety about like, why should anyone listen to me? So I wrote readings for a long time. Eventually, I finally started doing them live, and often it's great, but sometimes, and Meg knows this because I'll walk out of our office where I'm doing the session and like fall apart on the couch. And typically that person has either had a good experience or like that they tell me about later, or they just never talk to me again. Like, either way, it's fine. But I will fall apart being like, I don't think they got their money's worth. I don't think I answered their questions. I can't answer all their I will, it's a not insignificant reason of why I've transitioned back to written readings, in part because written readings they cost less energetically for me. Also, so consequently, I can also charge less, which in this economy is helpful. But live readings send me into an anxiety spiral of imposter syndrome about 25% of the time. And I don't love that. Like, being so real. Because I literally am on submission with an astrology for writer's book right now. Who knows if any publisher is going to buy it, but
they better. If you're listening to this, you better buy this book. It's really fucking
You're a
good.
publisher and you're listening to this.
I'm like, I know that I know what I'm talking about, but something about the live dynamic, I don't know if it takes me into into church space, into therapy space, where I suddenly am very conscious of the fact that I don't have psychological training. I am not I have no training in counseling whatsoever, aside from, years of therapy myself, which is not training. So I think I just get very self-conscious and very concerned that I'm not the right person that they should be going to. Yeah.
And this is a Saturn ruled person. Everyone's just really showing up today.
Just really representing our planetary rulers very strongly right now. Good for us. Cheers.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay, well, I'm a Jupiter ruled person.
Mm-hmm.
And
You don't say.
we're recording this on Jupiter's Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I love, when you were talking, Jeanna, I was just thinking about my imposter syndrome advice for the number 8, which is just do it. The Nike approach.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like there is something I did some reading on imposter syndrome before we did this. And so we can link some of those articles in the show notes. But there are different subtypes or different behaviors that people have theorized and done research on now. So the genius, feeling like things just come to them and they don't know how. And so it can't possibly be amazing because it just popped in.
Just gonna go.
Claircognizance is another word for that.
Totally. And the perfectionist who, it'll never be perfect enough to give. But I just think the just do it is really the only way to prove to oneself, or then to gather the empiric information that you would need to then say, okay, these are the verifiable events. And I'm not saying that I'm an expert on this, but I am the queen of a cold email, and I am the queen of just saying yes to something and then figuring out how to do it later.
Mm-hmm.
And
True.
I will say I should feel the most imposter syndrome because I'm always just doing things that I don't know how to do. There is something about okay, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to say yes. I'm going to post the Substack. I'm going to do the tweet. I'm going, whatever it looks like for you. I'm going to write the book. I'm going to say yes to this reading or this opportunity. And then you figure out that you can do it by doing it.
Yeah. 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 I mean, and also so many things you just have to learn by doing it. Books, you learn how to write every book you write. The book teaches you. This is making me kind of think of the other way in which imposter syndrome can show up, which is through something that you asked about to take us way back earlier, but is the comparison factor of it all. And again, I'm not the queen of the cold email, but I think I am the queen of having learned to identify when jealousy pops up. I can have a conversation with, which it does. I get jealous of people because I'm a fucking human being. And I have really done a lot of work to deal with the fear that can put, the not enoughness that can put into a person. And yeah, I've gotten a lot better over the years. I mean, I still have a ways to go, but I've gotten a lot better at understanding jealousy as information, as it's not that person. It's something they have, something they're doing that I want. And sometimes it's very fucking obvious. Like sometimes someone won a literary award and I'm like, well, I want that. Like, you know, and the bubble gets popped pretty quickly. But I think with spiritual, in the spiritual and occult industry, this is really interesting because again, so much it's not necessarily institutional acclaim that any of us are getting, but it is client recognition, it is social media followers, it is how publicly we are or are not talking about certain aspects of the craft. And I don't know. I think jealousy is a really, really toxic undercurrent that is in every industry, but really is present in a lot of spiritual spaces, like kind of undealt with. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes me think of the Many Moons planner
Yes.
Oh,
by
yeah.
the Moon Studio.
Mhm.
Literally, the note of the week is it's perfectly normal to make decisions from anger or prove it energy.
Mhm.
But if you stay in that energy forever, it will burn you out.
Word.
And
Yes.
so this is like a little different, but I do feel like the prove it can
Mhm.
also live in the same space as like doing things out of spite.
Yeah.
And I think like, hell yeah, if you want to like spite your way to a different reality for yourself, like, okay. But I love that note of like, if you stay in that energy too long, then it ultimately is going to kick back to you
Yes.
and it's going to be yours to deal with. So I feel that way all the time of like what I think, what I perceive other people to have achieved or have
Mhm.
gotten. And I do think, again, to bring it to like this individual and collective, imposter syndrome really does straddle the line because it is a fear fantasy. It's all happening within your little brain. And one thing that was funny in my research is people are like, this is not a medical diagnosis. Like,
I saw that too.
like it's not a mental health.
Like we call it syndrome, but it's not technically like a syndrome. It's a phenomenon. It's an experience. It's a
It's a
whatever.
human experience.
It's
Yeah.
it's a shared experience, but it happens in and of each of us.
Mhm.
And yeah, it is a societal thing as well. Cause like so much of it is perception and it's sneaky. Like Jeanna, you were saying earlier about how all the things that we're taught to want or desire are through the lens of white supremacy and capitalism and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, if you actually can't, you have to really interrogate your own sense of self and your own perception, especially in the comparison game. Because if it's like, oh, that person has the body that I want, it's like, well, why? Who taught you that that was the body to want?
Yeah.
Who said to you? And then that person, maybe this is again just my perception, but like that person might not look like that because of anything good. Like the times in which I've garnered the most compliments about my body are actually the times that I've been in like throes of disordered eating or like not well at all. I mean, like I'm well now, but like at the time, you know, not at all well. And it was like, well, but that person clearly drank some community Kool-Aid that said that I had a body that was worth wanting, even though I can tell you, you don't want to be in here right now.
Girl.
So it is all about perception and fear fantasy. And I guess if I'm thinking, I haven't thought about practical advice for imposter syndrome other than just do it. But like, I guess if I am thinking through the lens of practical advice, it's like when those feelings of imposter syndrome come up, start the interrogation and like commit to it because you will punch holes in your own arguments. We've even done it in this conversation.
100%.
Yeah.
And this is an area in which I also do think with, you know, considering it in the spiritual industry, and it's something I've even talked about on previous episodes, like because I am someone who does see things, or I sometimes see things, but I do hear things, and that is a version of quote unquote spiritualities, like spiritual gifting, whatever, that is talked about a lot. But I think about when I talk with folks who are like, don't see stuff, don't hear stuff, don't like not me. Guess I think that there's a weird kind of, I don't even know the language I want to use for it, but people can get really fucking weird about having quote unquote certain gifts, even calling them gifts, having certain experiences, not having other experiences. I don't know. I think the comparison game, especially when we're kind of out here in the wild, wild west, like where there's not really a lot of guidelines, it can just get really, really dicey. And it's really good to, yeah, like interrogating the feeling, understanding it as something that you want is a good reframe to move toward. Like, let desire teach you. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what's interesting about that kind of way of thinking is that, like, when we're fixated on what someone else has and what they're doing well, it makes it so much harder to see ourselves clearly and what we're
Yes.
doing well. Like,
Yeah.
I was trying to think about tarot cards that I might associate with the imposter syndrome, and I don't read reversals, so the sun reversed might actually be a great one for this, but I'm not going to talk about that. But I was thinking about the 7, and after listening to you, be the 8 of swords, and that kind of tension between those two cards of, like, what are you hiding from yourself? What are you defending against, whether that thing exists or not? Like, what mental block are you preparing for or trying to shield yourself from? And then the 8 being this, like, I am trapped in a narrative that I've made and now can't escape. Like, I have either decided that this problem exists, which it may or may not actually exist, but either way, it's my sole focus, or I've decided that there's no way to get out of the situation that I'm in. And I'm so sure that that's true that I'm not even looking. And so I think that's like something that about imposter syndrome that gets, I think it doesn't feel as important, but I think it's actually something that it really takes away from us, is being able to see not just the things that we do well and are actually succeeding at, but also the things that we do well and don't even think about. Jeanna, I know you talk about this sometimes with astrology, and so it might map onto numerology charts as well, but how the planets that are in happy positions, what's like in their joy or in their, what's the other word?
In domicile and exaltation, like planets that are not afflicted.
Yes, planets that are not afflicted, and parts of our chart that are not afflicted represent things that we do well and we think everybody can do well. And so we don't necessarily, and I mean, this is a thing that I'm talking about in this like workbook that I did recently too. It's like, what is easy for you actually, and how can you celebrate that instead of thinking that it doesn't matter because it's not hard for you. I don't know. This is like 10 thoughts in one. I think that imposter syndrome does kind of rob us of that delight in the things that we do well, or the things that are simple for us, that are our own companion genius, or our own genius friend or whatever. Did that make any sense? I feel
no.
I did cram 5 points into one sentence.
No, it made so much sense. It made so much sense. B, it looked like you were gonna.
Oh, was I? Well, I was just like, yeah, definitely. I don't know if I had anything to add, but the celebration point, or the imposter syndrome robbing us of the opportunity to see the things that we do well clearly, I just think is so key. And I also wrote down, let desire teach you. That was a Jeanna original from before as well, because I think, it's like, what do we want to be doing? What do we do well? They're not always the same thing.
Yeah.
So I do think that, speaking of interrogating, like, there is a lot, especially if you're a person who feels a lot of imposter syndrome, I think there's real juicy finds down the rabbit hole of, like, what do I actually do well? And how can I celebrate that more? Or how can I incorporate more of those skills into some of these other areas where I'm feeling not fully myself, or, not fully deserving of being there.
Yeah. You had asked earlier about like how we feel like we fit into the choir, and there are a lot of tarot people out there, and I think tarot is one of those things that feels, this is me projecting a little bit, but that can feel for people like it has a very low barrier to entry. Like, you buy a tarot deck, you listen to your intuition, whatever that means to you, and you can suddenly read tarot, right? And there are people that hate that notion there, and there are people that love that notion. And then there's everything in between. But I know when I started reading tarot, I was like, I'll never know enough to read for anyone or to talk about this publicly in literally any way. There's hundreds and hundreds of years of history. There's all these different ways to read the cards. Every time I read someone else's writing about tarot, I think that's so brilliant. And I would never think of that in a million years. And then my book came out, and I talked in the book about how I didn't feel anything when I first touched the cards, and you don't have to actually follow the rules and it's fine. And that has become a thing that I've become known for, to the point that I like rebranded my whole thing a couple years ago to be like, okay, we're doing rebels. Like, my point is not that I know everything. My point is that none of us know anything, and it's fine. Say fuck it and do what you want. And that's felt so much better than like holding myself hostage to this notion that I can't do anything until I know everything, which is like a Gemini rising special, but also I think is a Mercury ruled person thing too.
Mm-hmm.
But I needed to like see what other people loved about my work and then lean into that. And it's really helped me be like, oh, this is so much more comfortable, because what I am good at is breaking rules and asking questions. So what if I make that my whole spiritual journey, like archetype, all the things, and it's way more comfortable.
I love that. I have something, sorry, if you're watching on video on YouTube, you saw me just like leave the desk to go.
I was like, we'll just keep talking while you find whatever you're finding.
So this is going to take us back a few points, but I lost the jacket. Someone I live with may or may not have taken
book jackets.
the jacket off. I
didn't throw it out. I would never do that. I just don't want I don't want that kind of.
This is one of the great conflicts in my marriage is who reads with books. Meg does not like a book jacket, and I love a book jacket. And so we have varying books that have lost their jackets throughout the house.
Who knows?
I am seen.
These are the two genders. Tag yourself accordingly in the comments. But no, I wanted to pull off Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, which is just such a wonderful and extraordinary book. But early in the book, she's talking about like kind of the comparison and how we treat other people's success and all of that. And also it connects to this idea of like that ideas are their own thing. Ideas are their own spirit, their own genius. Because she shares what it was like. I'm not going to read this whole thing. I'm just going to read a tiny bit. But basically, the TLDR is that early in the book, she shares that she and Ann Patchett, the wonderful novelist Ann Patchett, had a very cute, like little meet cute. They literally kissed like in excitement over becoming friends. They then proceeded to have this long distance friendship, writing each other letters. And at one point, Elizabeth Gilbert shared that she'd been working on it, she had been working on a novel that was set in the Amazon, but like had kind of let it go because she was working on other memoirs. And then Ann Patchett wrote to her that she was working on a novel set in the Amazon. And they basically end up comparing notes and realizing like vampire romance, like fairy romantasy is a general genre. The storylines of their respective novel ideas were like, they were set in different time periods, but it's like one for one. It's so specifically, obviously the same narrative that like it's impossible to kind of so it's very real. But what Elizabeth Gilbert then writes in Big Magic is the worst and most destructive conclusion I could have drawn was that Ann Patchett had stolen my idea. That would have been absurd, of course, for many, many, many reasons. Such thinking comes from a wretched allegiance to the notion of scarcity, from the belief that the world is a place of dearth and that there will never be enough of anything to go around. The motto of this mentality is, somebody else got mine. Had I decided to take that attitude, I would surely have lost my dear new friend. I also would have collapsed into a state of resentment, jealousy, and blame. Alternatively, I could have turned that anger upon myself. I could have said, see, here's the ultimate proof that you're a loser, Liz, because you never deliver on anything. This novel wanted to be yours, but you blew it because you suck and you're lazy and you're stupid and because you always put your attention in the wrong place. And that's why you'll never be great. Lastly, I could have put the hate on destiny. I could have said, herein lies the evidence that God loves Ann Patchett more than he loves me. For Ann is the chosen novelist, and I, as I have always suspected in my darkest moments, am merely a fraud. I am being mocked by fate while her cup runneth over. I am Fortune's fool, and she is Fortune's darling, and such is the eternal injustice and tragedy of my cursed existence. But I didn't do any of that garbage. Instead, I chose to regard this event as having been a terrific little miracle. Because they figure out previously, they think that the idea is exchanged when they have that excited kiss backstage. This was the closest I'd ever felt to sorcery, and I wasn't about to waste this amazing experience by playing small. I saw this incident as a rare and glittering piece of evidence that all my most outlandish beliefs about creativity might actually be true, that ideas are alive, that ideas do seek the most available human collaborator, that ideas do have a conscious will, that ideas do move from soul to soul, that ideas will always try to seek the swiftest and most efficient conduit to the earth, just as lightning does. So, thank you for letting me read that.
Oh my God, I love that story. No,
Yeah,
and Big Magic is an amazing book, truly, if you have not read.
Yes.
Okay, and also, no one kiss me. Don't take my ideas from me. I am married.
You heard it here first.
You heard it here first.
Kiss Bee Scolnick and steal her
I'm here
precious
for a
ideas.
firm handshake, and that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, this book came out like 10 years ago, but that story lives so viscerally in me. And I think about it as like the most beautiful example of all the varying imposter syndrome things she writes about, that like, I could have done this, or I could have interpreted it this way. But instead, like, what a beautiful chance to be in relationship. Again, like we've been saying, in the collective, in community, in understanding that we all have a role to play, and that we all, get to keep certain ideas and get to invest in different areas, and that life is the richer for it.
I think fandom is such a beautiful example of a space that is ripe with imposter syndrome, for sure, but also with like creative generosity.
Yeah.
That idea of finding the next available human who can actually do the thing doesn't mean that like Elizabeth Gilbert couldn't have written her own Amazon book, later on, or another version of that. But I think fandom is people writing the same story about the same people over and over and over again. And nowhere in that experience are people saying, and again, generalization, but nowhere in that are people being like, oh, couldn't possibly have another one. They're like, holy shit, look, another piece of cake on the party table. Yeah, and there's that cartoon that's about
I love that so much, in part because also I think the fact that fan fiction legally cannot be monetized, should not be monetized, it takes the capitalism out of it in a lot of ways. And by just removing the idea that, I mean, of course, we've had recent examples of particular like Hermione authors blowing up with major book deals based on their fanfic, but like,
it's just regarding the Raylos out there.
Yeah. Just 50 Shades exists, so
disregarding those like the rare exception, it's like when it gets to be driven by joy, by just the joy of making something. I love the way you said it, B. It's like it's just another piece of cake. It's not, oh, that's the last piece of cake. No one ever write the angsty.
It no longer exists.
No one ever write the angsty only one bed Hermione. I'm using Hermione because I love Hermione. Like nobody ever write that one again. I'm like, no, I want a new one every night. Like, give it to
like
me.
The retelling of fairy tales, the retelling of myths. Like I just finished the latest book in the Dark Olympus like series by Katee Roberts, which is all just Greek mythologies but make it kink. And I'm like, I've been waiting for this my entire life. I have read this story 1,000 times, and also I've never read this story, and I always want it. I like, give me every Persephone Hades story, like all day, forever and ever, amen. Like I'm never gonna get enough of that. So I don't know.
I just finished a book that halfway through I looked it up online and someone was like, oh, this is a Wuthering Heights retelling. And I was like, holy shit, this is a Wuthering Heights. And like literally the characters' names are Katerina and Heath, as opposed to like,
incredible.
Like, it's so thinly veiled, but literally I was reading it and then all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, yeah, this is that other thing.
I love when it's thinly veiled. I'm like, we know what we're doing here. Like,
But again,
This is anything other than what it is.
Yeah.
But like celebrating the multiplicity of story and celebrating the truly, I mean, the word universal got like beat out of me in graduate school, but I'm reclaiming because like there are some stories that are universal. Every culture has Snow White. Every culture has their own version of Snow White, of like, they're called like beautiful girl stories. This is like the Aaron Thompson, fairy tale and folklore typing index. But like every culture has their version of some of these stories. The specifics vary, but like there are just certain themes and myths, like y'all are saying, that are just in our consciousness, like like certain experiences like imposter syndrome that are just in all of us. And we just get to play with them. And it's those ideas, those really like white supremacist capitalist ideas of ownership and owning an idea or owning a particular like space on a billboard. I don't know, like that it really nurtures, it takes us out of abundance and into scarcity.
100%. Yeah, I'm writing a book on the devil right now. Every culture has trickster archetypes. Every single one of them. I'm getting overwhelmed by how many tricksters there are. I'm like, at what point do I have to stop researching? Because I'm just like drowning in folklore. Like, yeah, because some things just really are universal or just keep showing up over and over and over again in the best way.
Yeah.
Well, and then it just really comes down to, again, trusting your own unique blend of whatever you have going on and saying, who cares that Casey McQuiston published Gays in Europe? I too can write Gays in Europe.
Again, I cannot have enough gays in Europe. Give me all the gays in Europe.
That's there's a personal anecdote in there about imposter syndrome.
I almost said, like, do we want to each share if we're imposter syndroming about something right now so that we can tell each other either to knock it off or like I think that's perfect. Like, I always want more gays in Europe. Literally always.
Yeah, well, that is now. So speaking of ideas as having their own beautiful timelines and will and all of the above, that novel, I was like, 2024 was not kind to me or that novel. We're going to put you away. There's too much going on. And then another idea that I had before sparked, and I was like, okay, I'm going to write a chapter of this. And then when I was sitting with that idea, all of a sudden the two characters from the previous novel popped up and I was like, oh, that's funny. Like that you want to be in this now. And then all of a sudden I was like, wait, if they have their own book, but then they're also in this one, is there a third parent? And now I have a trilogy. And this is a good time to talk about it because I'm having one of those moments where I'm like, oh, I had an idea that is far beyond my capacity and skill. But
I disagree with that.
I also disagree.
But that's
just
fine.
waiting for you to finish talking before I said that's not true.
I guess that's where I feel a little impostery is because you're like, especially switching genres, going from nonfiction that feels more researched, and you can be like, well, so and so said this, so obviously it makes sense that I would say this, to fiction where it's just little dolls in a sandbox that you're mashing together.
That sounds fun. I wish I could write fiction. But having been lucky enough to read sections of all of these things that you're talking about, first of all, I can say I want all of them. But secondly, like kind of what we were saying before, like every book has its own process and its own challenges. And I think every book feels impossible to write until you've written it, and even after you're done you're like, I didn't write that, like that was someone else, that I couldn't possibly have written that can't be true. Which is just to say, the only way to begin is by beginning. But I think you can, and the pieces I've read are so fucking good that I want so much more. I want to know everything about these characters. I want to see them be messy and gay in Europe and other places that I won't name because I don't want to spoil your book. But I love them. I love all of them, and I want to see them be messy and queer.
But I feel that be in the sense of like, oh, I am reaching for something. I mean, I see that also as, incidentally, and this might take us back to the number 5. I think that's like leveling up, right? It's like it was funny too. I was at my writers group last night, and one friend in the group is working on a wonderful novel, but recently went back to finish a long-standing nonfiction piece that they have been working on. And they were like, I've been so, in the weeds with novel stuff. Like, how do I write fiction? How do I even write a book? But being a very accomplished nonfiction writer, went back and was like, and was describing the process of like finishing this long form nonfiction piece. And they were like, oh, this is great. This is like, but because it's a sense of what have you built your skills to do? Like, and switching genres, switching mediums, like it's just a totally different, there are transferable skills, but also I think that's so real that in that like transition of I don't know, you can tell me if 5 is right, but like that it would feel activating to that question of authority.
Yeah. Well, because 5 is that change energy. So like, what is the change that you're making? And then how do all of the pieces of the system and the puzzle react to that change?
As someone who is currently on submission with an astrology book, it has been activating. I think anytime we are putting the work out there, which again, as has been discussed, vulnerable, anytime we are doing that in a new way or to new people, or maybe I should just say anytime I'm doing that in a new way or to new people, I get really fucking nervous and I suddenly start doubting my own authority and like, oh, but who am I? It's classic and it's old and it's boring. That's the other thing about imposter syndrome. It's so boring.
It's so boring.
It's so tedious.
It's so boring.
But because I'm trying to be in a state where I'm like, I have my relationship with the work outside of traditional publishing, but I'm also very literally like going around to editors like fucking Oliver in the musical, like, please, may I have some money for my book? Will you please buy my book? Like, so I'm definitely in the state right now.
Yeah. I'm kind of on the other side of this, is that I have, my second book is coming out in a couple months and I really need to do more promotion. But I am also trying to write my third book, and it was technically, originally I had said that I would have it to the publisher by the end of 2024, and that didn't happen. So now it's due in October, technically. And I am just in a state about it. I'm like, I don't know if I can write this. I don't know if I know enough. I don't know if it's too ambitious. I don't know if I'm the right person to have done this. Who thought that I could handle writing this giant book on the devil? So that's where I am. I just keep going. I'll just do some more research, which is actually not great. I am at the point where I have enough research and I need to be writing, but research feels easier than writing. Ooh.
You're the perfect person to write this book.
You really are, because again, and this might be a good full circle moment, again, imposter syndrome most traditionally happens to people who are high achieving and highly successful. So everyone listening to this, and including us, because we all just shared vulnerably, we're all just going to pat ourselves on the back, because just like bad people don't usually spend a lot of time wondering if they're a good person, I think people with imposter syndrome, like people who aren't doing the thing, don't sit around and think about maybe they should.
It's not about gender. It's like, if you're spending more than 5 minutes thinking about your own gender, like that might mean something, honey. If you're spending a lot of time wondering if you're queer, okay, welcome, come sit with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in that vein, if you're sitting around with imposter syndrome, you're probably a fucking badass. So,
and congratulations on your life and your choices. And I do mean that sincerely. Like,
yeah, because you're high accomplishing, high achieving, very successful. We didn't go around and boost either of you up, but we should do that. Jeanna.
Oh,
your book proposal, I've read it myself.
I've also read it.
I would buy it if I had money or power.
Okay.
Word, yes.
Yeah, Meg, yeah, you're absolutely the right person to be writing this devil book. I don't know if you heard yourself say, oh, and then I'm writing my third book. It's like, okay, brag.
Tedious. I know. It's
Brag about it. Also, babe, because I know that the deadline thing is a thing, I am going to very publicly say that you are at a publisher where you set your own deadlines and you gave yourselves 6 months to write a highly researched narrative nonfiction book.
It's true.
So I'm going to just say that it's not like the publisher gave you a deadline 2 years ago and then which even if that happened and you needed more time, great. But literally, you gave yourself 6 months.
The most charming part of this entire story, thank you, you're correct, you're both correct. The most charming part of this entire story, because I never ask for extensions, it stresses me out, I just would rather get it done. And both my agent and my editor were immediately like, yeah, this happens a lot when people sign multi-book deals, it's totally fine. And they gave me like twice as much time as I asked for, and I was like, oh, okay.
All right, copy.
Cool. I'm just right on schedule.
Also, again, to the point, like, we don't necessarily know what's normal, and this is why transparency in industries is really important, so that we're sharing our experiences with other people and are actually being validated that, like, something that, I don't know, we would have gotten in trouble for, again, to bring it full circle, like, as a kid, is actually just something that you get to ask and is a question you get to have, and no one's going to punish you for it. Except maybe the mean person in your brain who's mean.
Yeah, the mean version of Meg who hates me. Yeah, she's a bitch.
Well, my caveat this, because it's never final, but my final, I was thinking, like, what's my thought on what to do about it? And I feel like what we were talking about with, like, jealousy as information or our desires teaching us, that kind of thing. It's like, not only are we meant to, like, interrogate those beliefs, but then also that could be invitations into, like you were saying, you're not a therapist, you're not a counselor. Like, if you wanted to then get that knowledge, then having that insecurity of saying, like, oh, I don't think I'm educated enough to be working with this client or to be doing this work or whatever, then okay, that's information. Go out and get that education. That feels very practical to, like, and not art specific, to be saying sometimes imposter syndrome is showing us where we don't know enough or where we'd like a firmer foundation under our feet. But yeah, at the same time, it's like, that's not always necessary. And we are in very vulnerable situations of being like, please, sir, the Oliver.
So I will say, I think my practical advice, I'm reminded of a story. I'm going to give it by way of an anecdote. I met my best friend, whose kids I mentioned earlier, who are my favorite children in the whole wide world, and I love them so much. We met in the first semester of the first year of our graduate program. And we were in one class together and, like, hadn't really spent a lot of time talking. But then one day we happened, like, probably within the first month or two, we happened to be taking the very, very long walk down the hill that is the university, from the English building at the very top to the train to take us back to Boston at the very bottom. And I just turned to her, and in one of those moments of, like, I think I can trust this person, I was like, did you understand anything in class today? Because it all went over my head, and I think everyone else is smarter than I am. And she looked at me and said, I didn't understand anything in class today. I think you all are smarter than me, and it went over my head. And so just sharing it, and sometimes it can be a person who's in a similar space as you, like a class or whatnot, but, like, just sharing it with people, I think, helps, because also odds are really high that you're not the only one feeling that way. And it is very normalizing and regulating, I find, to be like, oh, cool, I'm not in my little shame silo by myself. There are other people who think I'm doing great, and I think they're doing great, even though they don't think they're doing great. So connection, community, people.
Yeah, mine's pretty much the same, actually. I think the things that help me the most when I'm, like, really in the throes of it is being vulnerable and, like, straight up asking people around me to tell me what I'm good at. Like, I made this thing, can you tell me that it doesn't suck? Or I'm really struggling with this idea, can you like bounce back and forth with me on how to make this happen, or what about this really works for you or what doesn't. But yeah, I have a few relationships, obviously these two being two of them, but I have some relationships with folks who are not here as well, where we are able to kind of be like, hey, I need a pep talk today. Like, can you gas me up a little bit? And not in a, I need you to lie to me, but in a very, I need you to reflect the best parts of me back to me. And I usually ask for it in writing so that I can like put it somewhere and read it again later, thousands of times if necessary, so that it can get into my brain. But at least for me, that's usually helpful, because I'm like, there's a record. There's a record that someone thought this and thought it enough that they would say it to me, and now I have it.
Yeah.
That's actually a good one. I do have a folder on my computer. That's like,
I was going to say, we're like, we get the benefit of testimonials and things for
Yeah.
our business. And I 100% also, if that's you, recommend keeping them in a place where you can look at all of them at once. But I know not everyone listening is going to be necessarily a small business owner that has to solicit blurbs and testimonials on their work. Well, but if you get reviews from bosses, or, you know, if you get peer reviews, or if you get nice compliments from people, like anytime anyone says something nice to you, copy and paste it or write it down and put it in a central location.
I was going to say, mine's literally screenshots from emails that people have written me that said nice things, and unhinged AO3 comments.
Yes.
I love that. I think that's brilliant.
AO3 commenters.
Like, lose my mind. I'm like, you're going in the folder.
Those really seem like the best, like top tier compliments is AO3 compliments. I wish I wrote fic just to get compliments on that.
I know. I want that for you too.
Well, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think in summation, imposter syndrome is something that happens to most people. And I do think may we all move forward with a certain level of at least understanding that if we are experiencing imposter syndrome, it probably means we're already doing better than we think. I'm going to take the fear fantasy. That really stuck with me.
I really loved that. When I read that, I was like, oh, this is what it feels like to me. Yes.
Yeah, because it is just fear. And it is fear of failure. It's fear of rejection. It's failure, or it's a fear of success too. That one's kind of bonkers to spend a lot of time thinking about. But yeah, or even like fear of being done with something. Like, I think perfectionism, especially for writers, is like, if I'm done with this, then I have to give it to someone, and then
and then I'm saying it's good enough, and what if it isn't?
Yeah, we need your piece of cake on the banquet table.
More cake for everybody.
Why would you deny us cake? It's so rude.
Why would you deny us cake, honestly?
Oh, well, I hope we all feel relief when we when we walk away from this conversation.
Yeah, I love y'all so much.
Same. And I love all of your work, and you both are brilliant. And I know that you do, but I hope that you can continue to come to me with feelings of imposter syndrome so I can set you straight.
Exactly. Nothing I like better than when someone tells me, I don't know if this is good, and I get to be like, have several seats, grab a drink, we're doing this, and give an aggressive pep talk.
Yeah. And if there are conversations that you want us to have or want to hear us have, please let us know. We are on Instagram. We're on Patreon. You can still support our pod there. We love you. We love every patron. And you can email us at callyourcoven@gmail.com.
We all talk every day. So if there are things you want to hear us talk about specifically, please do let us know, because we might as well record ourselves having the chat.
Yeah. And to our sweet listener who requested this, I hope
thank
that it was supportive, at least in so much as to say, you're already doing great, and we love you, and everyone listening is a badass. I said
100%. 100%.
Oh, love you guys.
So much love.